Zoe Kazan, you star in The Big Sick as Emily, who falls in love with Kumail Nanjiani, and then ends up suffering an illness and ends up in a coma due to that illness. First off, how did you become involved in the film?
In a really normal way, I auditioned. I auditioned for them. I read the script and I knew that they were seeing a bunch of women. Michael Showalter is someone that I had met in New York before, and he asked if I wanted to have a coffee or something and talk about the script before I went in. So, which I think he did with several actresses. And he sort of gave me the lowdown on, the real story and who Camille and Emily were. And then I just loved it. I loved the script, and I thought it seemed like something I had never seen before. Which is obviously very rare, and very rare to see that, like, also with such an appealing package, like with Judd and Barry Mendel and Michael Showalter and all these guys, like, who I respect so much. So, I just gave it my all. Got lucky.
And what was it like, auditioning for a role to play the writer of the screenplay in her story opposite her husband?
It is a kind of like John Malkovich situation where you're like, who's inside of whose body? Emily wasn't there in the audition room, and I'm very grateful that they made that decision ahead of time, because I think that would have been a lot harder, especially because the scenes are very intimate. Like, one of the scenes was a kind of like getting to know you flirtation scene, and the other scene was the breakup scene. And I think if I had had to do that, like, in front of her, playing her to her husband, like, might have felt a little too close for comfort. By the time I was actually acting in the room in front of Emily, we had had so much discussion and getting to know you and rehearsal time. So some of that was taken out by then.
So, what was that process of collaborating, with her, to play this role? It seems like a very unique, special kind of collaboration it would be between a writer and an actor.
Yeah, it was very unique. I've never experienced anything like it before, and I don't expect to again. At some point, Emily and I sort of joked around that it was like we were two parents to this character, like both trying to raise her. When I couldn't be in the room, Emily was the advocate for Emily, and when Emily couldn't be there, I was the advocate. And I think the person on screen is somewhere between us. I think we're very similar in a lot of ways, but the ways in which we're different sort of are what show up on screen, I think.
What were your thoughts on the character as written, when you first read the script that you found especially compelling and interesting that you wanted to play?
Well, I would say on that first read that I felt like I could feel their intention was to put two people on screen, not like a boy and a girl. That I felt like their intention reaching through the script. There was something still kind of inchoate about what I saw. Like, the script was not the script that you now see in its final form at that point. They still had a lot of rewriting that they were going to do. But there was something at the center of it that seemed like, oh, this is like an adult love story. It's about two people, and two people like finding themselves more through this journey. And then there were things in the script that I had never seen on screen before. Like, the turn that the movie takes is obviously very unique. But also, like, so much of his Muslim American experience, like, I've never seen that on film, but, like, especially not in like a, sort of mainstream comedy before. Little things like him not wanting to pray, but not wanting to tell his parents that he wasn't praying. So, like, going down and setting a timer on his phone, like, it just seemed very accessible. Like, everyone has those things that they are not yet brave enough to face in their life. I think the character of Emily, as we worked on it together, assumed even more shape in a way. But all of the bones were there in that original thing I saw, like, her intelligence and her toughness as a person, and her not being like won over easily. And, I think there's a pressure on people, women in particular in film, to seem lovable or seem charming. And I felt them sort of like not asking this fictional Emily to provide too much of that to, sorry, the person's computer that this is chiming. It's not mine. It's not my fault. Anyway, you know, I don't know. I think somehow in all of our work together, she became a more real person. But I think that from the start, those things were there.
Now, of course, your character, due to her illness, is incapacitated during the middle portion of the film, which is also another unique aspect of this love story, is that you kind of taken out of kind of the middle part of it. Was that a unique challenge to kind of take on this interrupted character arc, in a sense, to come in at the beginning and then come back in later on?
Yeah, it was a unique challenge. I mean, when we were in that like rehearsal period of time, I kept saying, we were working on the third act, and I kept saying, you know, she never got a second act. Like traditionally in film, like the first act is when you sort of like gather all the pieces and introduce all the characters and set up the problem of the film. The second, or the character's problem. The second act is the hero's journey, like how like one event pushes the next event to lead our hero towards the moment where he or she can change. And then the third act of the film is catharsis. And she never got that hero's journey. Like, she was asleep for it, and her parents sort of got it instead. But as a result, like she hasn't gone through the transformation everyone else has gone through in order for her to embrace love. And me like speaking up for that over and over again actually sort of got folded into the script. And now Emily says, like, you know, I was asleep. I didn't go through this transformation you went through, which is like essentially what I kept saying for her in the room. So, you know, I think to find like a satisfying, to have like the movie feel satisfying for her character arc as well was something that we really worked hard on, and Kumail and Emily rewrote extensively.
Yeah, that is one of the crucial parts, I think, of the film's effect, is that after she does wake up, you know, in a lot of romantic comedies, that's your kind of happy ending reconciliation moment, and yet right. Emily does get to have complex feelings about Kumail and about her illness and recovery, and it doesn't. She doesn't become something that's granted to him by his hero's journey.
Yes, he always says, like, this can't be a movie in which a girl goes into a coma so a guy can change.
Yeah, and what was it like playing those scenes in the film that you know, where she has this story of her own that we are now getting, you know, clued back into?
Yeah, I mean, Emily and Kumail talked a lot about how the third act is sort of from Emily's perspective, and we do sort of sort of like rejoin her in a way and see like, oh, of course, like she's gone through this massive thing that has nothing to do with him, that has to do with her health and her body, and like feeling helpless, and you know, her relationship with herself more than anyone. So like I said, like I felt really grateful to our rehearsal period because I got to express all of my concerns about that, and we got to really work on it and make sure that every scene was doing as much work as possible. But then actually playing those scenes, you know, I was surprised by how vulnerable I felt. You know, I think to have your body be physically weakened like that is makes you, you know, feel things in a different way. It makes you feel your own mortality. And I found those scenes very painful to play.
And after Emily wakes up, that's when, of course, you get to you know, share the screen in a more substantial way with your on-screen parents, played by Ray Romano and Holly Hunter. Wow. What was it like getting to get that relationship with them? You know, finally, you know, play those scenes with them.
Well, you know, it's funny, and I know I keep harping on this rehearsal period, but I think it's really crucial. Like, we made the film very quickly, so we had to do a lot of our like improvising and a lot of our discussion ahead of time. When I watched the film, I'm surprised by how few scenes we actually have together, partially because some scenes got cut, but also partially because you know, during that like lead up to production, I think we really bonded and really like talked a lot about what kind of family is this and what is their relationship. And Holly in particular made an effort to sort of tie us together. Like there are little things in the film, like she's wearing a necklace and she gave me the same necklace to wear as well. Like we've picked this thing out together. And like she picks up my sweater in a scene and says, oh, my favorite sweater. Like I've stolen her sweater from home, you know? And that was something that the costume designer, like in my fitting, was like, oh, Holly wants you to wear a sweater of hers. Like, can you try these 3 sweaters on? So things like that like gave me a tremendous amount of pleasure because it did make me feel connected to her in this way where when we got to those scenes, I felt like we are a real mother and daughter. And, you know, you end up having to do a lot of work in a very little time. But I think a lot of the kudos goes to Michael and Barry, Mendel, and Jed for the way that they orchestrated that sort of like pre-production time.
You know, like you know, Kumail Nanjiani, you are also a writer who you know, who's then an actor, and you've acted in your own film, for instance, Ruby Sparks, your own screenplay. So could you relate to his experience on this film in that sense, even though of course that film wasn't autobiographical in the way this one is?
Right, but I was acting with my partner, so complicated in a similar way, I think. Yeah, I could relate to it. I mean, I think I could relate to the sense of having like, you know, the tremendous pressure of feeling like all these people have shown up and are working so hard on something that came out of your brain. Like I've had that on Ruby Sparks and also on the movie I wrote with my boyfriend, Wildlife, which we directed this past year, and also in all of my plays. Like it's real pressure. You know, you feel like, oh, I better have done a good job. But I think I also, you know, frankly, I think I felt it more about the working with your partner. Like it was very hard for Paul and I to figure out how to separate church and state, you know? You know, I feel like we're much better now at working together than we were 5 years ago, 6 years ago when we made that movie. But it's still a challenge. And watching Kumail and Emily, I was like, I recognized some of the challenges of it. And I also thought, oh, like that's what it looks like when you've been together much longer. You know, at that point they had been together twice as long as Paul and I had when we made Ruby Sparks together. So I was like, oh, maybe some of it is just, you know, Asian experience.
As a writer in general, does that affect your work as an actor? Does it influence how you approach a screenplay or role that you haven't written?
Well, it's a little hard for me to know because I've always written. So you know, I was writing before. As soon as I could pick up a crayon and draw a picture, you know, I was making stories. And so in a way, I don't know what it's like to not have a writer's brain also participate in the process. I will say, like, having written several things now that have been produced, I have a lot more empathy for people making art. Like, I am a lot less judgmental. I'm a lot quicker to praise like what is good about something rather than jump on what's bad about it. I think it's very, very hard to make anything, to make any piece of art, let alone a piece of art that you can be halfway proud of. And when it happens, like you really have to think like, oh, luck was on our side, because you can have all the right ingredients and still have something go wrong. So I think it's made me more patient probably. And you know, I'm a big cheerleader for other people, I think, more than I would be if I wasn't also on the other side of the table.
And you've received a lot of positive notices and recognition for both your writing and acting. You know, you nominated for an Emmy for Olive Kitteridge a couple of years ago, and Ruby Sparks, you know, the Spirit Awards, nominated for screenplay, for instance. Is it the recognition feel different? You know, if it's for writing or for acting, is there one that feels particularly special to you?
No, that it all feels wonderful. It feels wonderful to be recognized for your work. You know, I think those two examples are both examples of work that I felt especially proud of and projects that I loved that meant something very special to me. So I think it's more about like when those things, when the things that feel like your babies get recognized, like, I don't know, if you know, it feels like it's bigger. It feels like it's I at least think of all the other people that helped make that happen. Like when Ruby Sparks got nominated for the best screenplay, was like, God, all of the tiny decisions of all of my collaborators that helped like make my work shine, that is also being recognized. You know, I don't know, it feels sort of holistic, I guess.
Well, I want to congratulate you on this film and you know your continued work as a writer and an actor, and thank you so much for talking with me today.
Thank you so much. Have a really great day.
You too.
Bye. Bye.